The man with the camera had been hiding in the fourth-floor stairwell of Cedars-Sinai Medical Center for 6 hours when he finally got the shot he'd been waiting for. Through the small window in the stairwell door, he could see directly into room 427, where a 13-year-old girl lay in a hospital bed, tubes running from her arms, her mother sitting beside her, holding her hand. The mother was Madonna, the girl was her daughter Lourdes, and the photographer, a paparazzo named Marcus Webb, was about to make what he thought would be the biggest payday of his career. He didn't know he was about to end it instead. It was March 2009, and Lourdes had been rushed to Cedars-Sinai 3 days earlier with what doctors initially feared was appendicitis, but turned out to be a severe kidney infection. She'd been running a fever of 104 degrees, was severely dehydrated, and needed IV antibiotics and constant monitoring. The infection was serious enough that doctors wanted to keep her hospitalized for at least a week. Madonna had been at the hospital almost constantly since Lourdes was admitted. She'd had her security team clear the entire fourth-floor hallway, posted guards at every entrance, and made it absolutely clear to hospital staff that her daughter's privacy was non-negotiable. No press, no photos, no exceptions. Marcus Webb didn't care about any of that. Webb was what's known in the industry as a rat packer, a paparazzo who specialized in getting photos that other photographers couldn't or wouldn't get. He built a reputation for being relentless, for finding ways into places he shouldn't be, for getting shots that violated every boundary of decency and privacy. He'd photographed celebrities in their homes through telephoto lenses. He'd followed them into bathrooms. He'd chased them through traffic. And he'd sold those photos to tabloids for hundreds of thousands of dollars. When word leaked that Madonna's daughter was hospitalized, Webb saw opportunity. The tabloids would pay a fortune for photos of Madonna in crisis, for images of her daughter sick and vulnerable. He'd heard through his contacts that the girl was in Cedars-Sinai, and he'd spent 2 days figuring out how to get past security. The answer was simple. He'd walked in wearing hospital scrubs he'd bought online, carrying a clipboard, looking like he belonged. Security had barely glanced at him. Once inside, he'd found the stairwell that gave him a sightline into room 427, and he'd waited. Now, through his 300mm lens, he was photographing a 13-year-old girl at her most vulnerable. Lourdes asleep, with oxygen tubes in her nose. Madonna with her head down, clearly crying. Mother and daughter in a moment of private fear and pain. Webb took 247 photos over the course of that afternoon. Every angle, every moment of vulnerability, every tear on Madonna's face, every IV line in Lourdes' arm. Then he packed up his camera, walked out of the hospital the same way he'd come in, and headed straight to his contact at a major tabloid magazine. "I've got Madonna's daughter in the hospital," he told them. "Exclusive photos. She looks really sick. Madonna's a mess. This is worth at least $300,000. The tabloid editor looked at the photos on Webb's laptop and felt a moment of hesitation. There was something particularly cruel about these images. A child in a hospital bed, a mother's private grief. But tabloid sales had been down, and exclusive Madonna content always sold millions of copies. "We'll give you $250,000, the editor said. "But we need to run them tomorrow, before someone else breaks the story." Webb agreed. The contract was signed. The photos were scheduled to run in the next morning's edition, which would hit newsstands at 6 a.m. What neither Webb nor the tabloid knew was that Madonna had anticipated exactly this scenario. When she'd first brought Lourdes to the hospital, one of her first calls had been to Martin Garbus, one of the most feared privacy attorneys in the country. She'd hired a private security firm to not just guard the hallway, but to monitor every entrance and exit of the hospital with facial recognition software. And she'd put her publicist, Liz Rosenberg, on high alert to track any chatter about photos being shopped. At 8 p.m. that evening, Madonna got a call from her security team. "We've got him," the head of security said. "Marcus Webb entered the hospital at 11:47 a.m. in hospital scrubs he had no authorization to wear." was in the fourth-floor stairwell from approximately noon until 6 p.m. We have him on security cameras. We have photos of him photographing through the stairwell window. And we just got confirmation from a contact at Celebrity Weekly that they're planning to run photos of Lourdes tomorrow morning. Madonna's response was immediate and precise. Get Martin on the phone, get Liz on the phone, and get me the name of every person at Celebrity Weekly who touched those photos. What happened over the next 12 hours became legendary in both legal and entertainment circles. At 9 p.m., Martin Garbus filed an emergency injunction in California Superior Court, seeking to block publication of the photos. The filing included security camera footage of Webb entering the hospital in unauthorized scrubs, timestamps showing him stalking a minor patient, and expert testimony about the severe emotional distress that publication would cause to a hospitalized child. At 10 p.m., Liz Rosenberg began making calls, not to tabloids, not to friendly media, to the parents of every major celebrity in Hollywood. Someone photographed Madonna's daughter in her hospital bed, she told them. It could be your kid next. We're going to make an example of this guy, and we need everyone on record supporting a child's right to privacy in medical settings. By midnight, statements of support had come in from Tom Hanks, Angelina Jolie, Brad Pitt, Julia Roberts, George Clooney, and 47 other A-list celebrities. Many of them had children. All of them understood that if this was allowed to happen to Madonna's daughter, it could happen to theirs. At 1 a.m., Martin Garbus got his emergency injunction. A judge ruled that publication of the photos would cause irreparable harm to a minor child in a vulnerable medical situation, and ordered Celebrity Weekly to halt publication immediately. At 2 a.m., Celebrity Weekly's legal team called the editor who'd bought the photos. Pull them now. If we publish, we're looking at millions in damages and possible criminal charges for Webb. The editor called Webb. The deal's off. We're not running the photos, and we're returning them to you. Whatever you do with them, we were never involved. Webb, who'd been counting his $250,000, suddenly had nothing. But Madonna wasn't done. At 8 a.m. the next morning, as Webb was trying to figure out how to salvage the situation, he received a certified letter at his home. It was a lawsuit from Madonna, filed in California Superior Court, seeking $10 million in damages for invasion of privacy, intentional infliction of emotional distress, trespassing, fraud, the fake hospital scrubs, and violations of California's right to publicity laws. The lawsuit included every security camera image of Webb, every timestamp, a detailed breakdown of how he'd stalked a 13-year-old patient, and a statement from Lourdes' doctor about the potential psychological harm of having her medical vulnerability exploited. Webb called 3 lawyers. All 3 told him the same thing: you're going to lose this case, badly. But the lawsuit was just the beginning. At 10 a.m., Liz Rosenberg held a press conference. Madonna didn't attend. She was still at the hospital with Lourdes, but Liz stood in front of 50 cameras and told the story in detail. The stalking, the fake credentials, the photos of a sick child. And then she did something that changed everything. We have the name of every photo agency, every tabloid, and every website that Marcus Webb has worked with over the past 10 years, Liz said. And we're putting all of them on notice. If any of you ever purchase, publish, or distribute photos from Marcus Webb again, you'll be named as co-defendants in future lawsuits. Marcus Webb is done, and anyone who works with him is done. The room went silent. This wasn't just about one paparazzo. This was about establishing a precedent that there were boundaries that couldn't be crossed. By noon, every major photo agency had sent internal memos. Do not accept submissions from Marcus Webb. Do not engage with Marcus Webb. Consider him permanently blacklisted. By 2 p.m., the paparazzi community itself had turned on Webb. Other photographers, even those who regularly pushed ethical boundaries, publicly distanced themselves from him. Photographing a kid in a hospital bed? That's not journalism, that's predatory, one prominent paparazzo told TMZ. By 5 p.m., Webb's phone had stopped ringing entirely. Every contact he'd built over 15 years had gone silent. 3 months later, the lawsuit went to court. Webb's defense was that he was a journalist documenting a news event. Madonna's legal team destroyed that argument in under an hour. This was not journalism, Martin Garbus told the judge. This was a man who committed fraud to gain access to a hospital, who stalked a minor patient for 6 hours, who photographed a child's medical vulnerability for profit. There is no First Amendment protection for this behavior. The judge agreed. Madonna was awarded $4.8 million in damages. Webb was ordered to destroy all copies of the photos and provide forensic proof that they'd been deleted from every device he owned. He was also permanently banned from coming within 500 feet of Madonna, her children, or any property she owned. But the financial judgment wasn't the real punishment. The real punishment was that Marcus Webb could no longer work. No agency would rep him. No tabloid would buy from him. No website would publish his photos. His 15-year career was over. Within 6 months, he'd filed for bankruptcy. Within a year, he'd moved out of Los Angeles entirely. But Madonna still wasn't done. She used the case as a platform to push for stronger privacy protections for children of public figures. She worked with California legislators to strengthen laws around photographing minors without parental consent. She funded a legal defense fund for celebrities who couldn't afford top-tier lawyers when their children's privacy was violated. And most importantly, she made it clear to the entire paparazzi industry: go after her? Fine. Go after her children, and she would end your career. 5 years later, Marcus Webb gave an interview to a small media ethics podcast. He'd moved to Oregon, was working in a camera store, and was trying to rebuild some kind of life. The interviewer asked him if he had any regrets. "I regret all of it," Webb said. "I told myself I was just doing my job, that if I didn't get those photos, someone else would. But that was bullshit. I was stalking a sick kid for money, and Madonna made sure I paid for it in every possible way." The interviewer asked if he thought Madonna's response was proportionate. "She ended my career," Webb said. "Cost me everything I'd built, got me blacklisted from an entire industry. And you know what? She was right to do it, because what I did was indefensible. I crossed a line that should never be crossed, and she made an example of me so that other photographers would think twice before doing the same thing." Today, there's a clause in many paparazzi agency contracts known informally as the Madonna Rule. It states that photographers will not accept assignments or submit photos involving children of celebrities in medical settings, educational settings, or other private circumstances where the child has a reasonable expectation of privacy. Violation of this clause means immediate termination and potential legal liability. The rule exists because of what happened to Marcus Webb. Lourdes recovered fully from her kidney infection. She was released from the hospital after 8 days and made a complete recovery. Years later, in an interview, she was asked if she remembered the incident. "I remember being really sick," she said, "and I remember my mom being there the whole time. But I didn't know about the photographer until years later. When my mom finally told me, I asked her why she'd gone so hard after him. You know what she said? Because you were my daughter, you were sick, and you deserved to be safe. And I had the power to make sure that what he did to you wouldn't happen to someone else's kid, so I used it." Madonna rarely speaks about the incident publicly, but in a 2015 interview, she was asked about her reputation for being ruthless when it came to her children's privacy. "I'm ruthless about exactly one thing," she said: "protecting my kids. I don't care about my own privacy. I gave that up when I became famous. But my children didn't sign up for this life. They deserve to be sick in private. They deserve to be kids in private. And if someone violates that, yes, I will use every resource I have to make sure they regret it. Not as revenge, as deterrence." The interviewer asked if she thought she'd made an example of Marcus Webb. "Absolutely," Madonna said. Because the week after we got that injunction, after his career was over, after every agency blacklisted him, you know what happened? Paparazzi stopped camping outside my kids' schools. They stopped following them to the playground, because they knew that if they crossed that line, they wouldn't just lose a lawsuit, they'd lose their livelihood. She paused. Marcus Webb made a choice. He chose $250,000 over a child's dignity. And I made a choice too. I chose to make sure that choice cost him everything, so that the next photographer who thought about hiding in a hospital stairwell would remember what happened to Marcus Webb and decide it wasn't worth it. Today, Marcus Webb is 52 years old. He still works at that camera store in Portland. He occasionally teaches photography classes at a community college. He no longer works in paparazzi photography, and according to those who know him, he tells his students a very specific lesson. There are photos that aren't worth taking, he tells them. Not because you'll get caught, not because it's illegal, but because some boundaries exist for a reason. And if you cross them, there are people with the resources and the determination to make sure you never work again. I learned that the hard way. Don't make my mistake. The story of Madonna and Marcus Webb is taught in media ethics classes as a case study in the limits of press freedom. It's cited in privacy law textbooks as an example of how public figures can successfully defend their children's privacy. And it's whispered about in paparazzi circles as a warning. There are some photos that will cost you more than they'll ever pay. If you've ever wondered whether one person can change an entire industry's behavior, this is your answer. Madonna didn't just end Marcus Webb's career. She established a boundary that an entire industry now respects. Not because they suddenly grew consciences, because she proved that crossing that boundary would cost them everything. Share this with someone who needs to hear that protecting the vulnerable is worth fighting for, no matter how powerful the opposition. Subscribe for more stories about using power to establish boundaries that protect those who can't protect themselves. And if you've ever been told you're being too protective of your children or too aggressive in defending their privacy, remember Madonna and Marcus Webb. Sometimes ruthless is exactly what the situation requires.